Okay, folks. So here's the bottom line that we arrived at yesterday. That if a woman is sold an apartment, like the case of where a guy sold his apartment to an almana, to a widow, there's no din of bar matzran. There's no din of first that the neighbor has first rights when it comes to a woman. The rabbi did not include her in their gezerah. And even though that was because of a social dynamic of women are not in a position to go and find apartments in other places because up until very recently in world history, women were considered to be meant to stay at home and not engage in enterprise and things like that. Nonetheless, the whole accommodation of bar mitzvah is a takanas chachamim. So the chachamim never applied their takana to women, period. So therefore, this poor almana cannot be displaced from the apartment if she's already purchased the apartment. And furthermore, even if she hasn't purchased it, a person would have a right to sell it to her even before selling it to his neighbor. So I noticed the footnote asks an interesting question. Um, he says, "L'chora yesh lahakshot l'fi masha kosafnu le'el b'shem Rabbeinu Hagon HaMechaber Shlita." He says, "Why don't we ask the following question based on what Rav Sharaga himself had written previously? Dehayom kol dayar b'vinyan nechshav shutaf b'vinyan v'kocho yoter mimatzran ragil ayin sham." That today, when I have a neighbor in my condo, it's not just that he's a regular neighbor, but he also has a joint ownership portion in the hallway and in other parts of the building, which are shared spaces. The Rama paskins that even more powerful than a neighbor, a person who's a partner in a property has first rights of refusal, even to the point that he can remove a woman who wishes to intrude on that partnership. So why can't you make the argument as follows? Like he speaks out, he says, even though using the argument of bar metzra, you can't force this almana to be removed from the sale. But why can't I use the argument that I'm a partner in the shared spaces? And instead of you selling to this woman not only the condo, but also the shared spaces in the condominium building, I have a first rights of refusal because I already have an ownership stake in those shared spaces. Omnam ayin sham b'shach uvepischei tshuva shehidiu poschem shecholkim al harama hanal. He says, so the answer we would have to suggest is as follows. There are other poskim brought by the Shach and the Pischei Tshuva that disagree with the Rama, that who suggests that a partner in a joint ownership endeavor can prevent a woman from buying the partnership share, the other partner's portion. V'lachein kasvadim ha'isha kvar kansos hadira inechsheves muchzekes ve'ein lahotzi miyada. And therefore, in a situation where she already bought the apartment, right? If it's post facto, b'di'eved, therefore you can rely on those poskim who say that her power is so great that she can prevent even a partner from removing her. Aval shuv ra'inu b'sefer Kesones Yosef. But I also want to point out that I saw in another sefer called Kesones Yosef, sha'achar shehevias hamachlokas hanal kasav dekaimelan k'psaka rama hanal, Kevin Shemaran bebeit Yosef Basa came b'shem Maharil ve'en liton kimli neged maran ad kan devarav. He says it's not so simple because it seems like the Mechaber himself paskins like the Rama, that if there are two partners who jointly own a property and one of the partners wants to sell his share, he has to give first rights of refusal to the partner before he can sell it to a third party. And that's true even if the third party is a woman. Umikol makom kvar kasav Rabbeinu Hagon HaMechaber Shlita b'shut Baruch Omer she'efshar liton kimli neged mashakasav maran bebeit Yosef kol shelo hiviu b'shulchan aruch hayin sham ולכן הכנמי האישי יכול לטעון כמלי כהשך והפסחי. However, Rav Sharaga is of the opinion that even when the Rav Yosef Cairo, who's the author of the Shulchan Aruch, paskins a certain way, but if he doesn't cite that psak in the Shulchan Aruch itself, a person could say, I don't paskin like that Rav Yosef Cairo psak. So the bottom line is that Rav Sharaga is paskining that the laws of a bar mitzvah have limited application, and one of those limited cases of application is where the purchaser is a female. And the footnote suggests that perhaps you might be able to remove her from the sale before the fact, based on this argument that the neighbor is not just a neighbor, but he's a partner in the joint spaces of the condominium building. But post facto, if it's already been sold to her, there's nothing that you can do about it. Okay. Okay. Let's go on to the next shuva. Mi adif bar metzra o shutaf. This lines up perfectly with what we just were studying. Who takes priority, a neighbor or a partner? Okay, so let's take a look. Hashachin sheli mocheret adira shalo. My neighbor is selling his apartment. Avani yahudati lo shani me'unyan liknot et hadira. And I told him, I'm your neighbor. I have first rights, and I would like to buy your apartment. But instead, he ignored me and sold the apartment instead to one of his business partners. So what are my rights? Does the fact that he has a business partnership with another person give him the right to ignore the law of bar mitzvah or not? That's the question. Okay, everyone. Well, a family member would have presumably less of an there would be less of an argument unless he could say that he's one of my dependents. Remember, we learned the law that if someone is a dependent of mine, let's say I want to sell my apartment to my son and have him move in. I don't know that a neighbor could make the argument of bar mitzvah over there because, let's think about it for a second. My son may be the same entity as I am, but I'm not sure that you could make that argument to anyone other than a child, because unless I'm gifting it to one of my relatives. If I'm gifting it to a relative, so then that would be a different situation. The whole argument of bar mitzvah is that we tell the guy who seeks to purchase the apartment, go find an apartment somewhere else. There are plenty of apartments available. Why take this apartment when I can get so much more benefit out of it, since I can knock down the wall between us and expand my apartment? But if you can't make that argument because the seller is giving it at a very, very reduced rate, or is giving it as a gift to a family member, let's say, so then you can no longer make that argument. So a family member, I think it would all depend on the nature of the sale. If he's selling it at full price to his cousin, then I don't think that just the fact that he's his cousin is going to make a difference. The neighbor would have first rights of refusal. But here, what we're dealing with is a person who says, I already have a financial association with another person who's not my neighbor, and I want to argue, as we'll see in a moment, that already existing financial arrangement may give him first rights as well. So Hagemara Omeret, Dina de bar metzra yeshbo mishum ve'asisa hayashar ve'hatov. So the Gemara tells us that the whole premise of the law of bar metzra is based on the fact that God wants us to do that which is upright and good. Klomar, Adam Sharotza Limkor Dira Okarka Vahashachen Shalom Yinam Liknota. So what that translates into is that if a person is selling his apartment and his neighbor wants to buy it, Yeshlo Zuchut Kedima Hu Mishalim et Oto Hamachir She Mutza Lemechira. Then he has first rights of refusal as long as he's willing to meet the sale price. Okay, Ki Omrim Lakone Shuhu Lo Shachein Lech Tikne B'Makom Acher. Because we can tell the outsider who wants to purchase it, why dafka this apartment? Go buy an apartment somewhere else. The law dafka kan kiven shahashachen minyando. Since the neighbor's interested in it, he stands to benefit so much more than you do by getting that apartment. The imam macharet hadira la adam zar zuchuto shel hashachen shehu habar metzra l'saleket hakoneh. And as we learned in the previous tshuva, even if it's after the fact where the seller sold the apartment to a third party, the neighbor can actually take him to the third party to a beis din and force him to vacate the premises. Pay him everything that he paid for the purchase of the apartment, and the neighbor can take it. And the Sma explains, it's so powerful is the neighbor's rights based on this idea of you shall do that which is upright and good. God wants people to go above and beyond the letter of the law and do that which is righteous. Okay, so he's really just recapping everything that we've already said. So fine, very good. Now, because of B'tshubas Maimoni, Shadina de Bar Metzra Karapula Mitzvahs Ase. In a response, the Rambam writes that the law of Bar Metzra is almost like a Mitzvahs Ase Midioraisa. Is almost. It's not, of course, because it's only a rabbinic enactment, but it's almost. Omnam hachasam sofer kasav, the dina de bar metzra hu lo din mefurash b'Torah. But Chassam Sofer says that it's not explicit in the Torah. Zal hichnisu bichlal ve'asisa yosher ve'hatov. And it's our sages who enacted this law, saying that it's subsumed under doing the upright thing. Va'afilu einenu din Torah. And even if it's not a Torah law, but we still coerce a person to vacate the premises if the neighbor can benefit more. But there's one caveat. If the whole premise of the idea is that it's no skin off of the other party's noses, if you sell it to the neighbor, right, then if there is skin off the nose of one of the parties, so then the law of bar metzra doesn't apply. And so if the seller stands to lose some kind of tangible benefit by selling to his neighbor instead of a third party, then the law of bar metzra will no longer apply. Uvesof tshuvato kasav sham ki adam shelo poel al pi hadin v'hareu achzar ka'orev lahotzi ish min achalasa ubeso ubegeder arug masigi gevul re'ehu v'chule. And at the end of the tshuva, the Chassam Sofer writes that if a person does not comport himself according to the law, and he instead is cruel like a raven to remove a person from his ancestral rights and his place, he is begeder arur masigavul re'ehu. He is included in the curse that is contained in the Torah. Cursed be the man who encroaches on his friend's boundaries. V'lihiyos Yisrael kadoshim uvnei tarbus ein safek sheratzanim hu lasos ratzon habori v'yisbarach beisam v'nachalasam. And there's no question that in order for the Jewish people to retain their holiness and be people of proper cultural behavior that ein safek sheritzonam hu lasa ritzon habori v'isbarach beisam v'nachalasam, that the Jewish people want to do the right thing. They want to do Hashem's will. So, which of course, is not always the case among some of our Jewish brethren. But we have to hope that, there's an instinctive desire for people to do the right thing. So now we have to think about, what if a man who owns an apartment sold it to his business partner? The Hagemara omeret bebava metzia she'im machar l'shutav shelo ein bazedina de bar metzra. The Gemara in Bava Metzia states explicitly that if you sell it to your partner, then a neighbor cannot protest. Rashi pirish medubar b'shutav shemocha l'shutvo ba'oso karka is chelko basada. So Rashi explains that, what are we talking about? Reuven and Shimon are partners in a piece of farmland, and Reuven decides that he's moving to Florida. So he turns to Shimon and says, "Buy me out. You use the field every other day. Now you get to use the field every day." So Levi, who has an adjacent piece of property, can't interfere in that sale because he's not as closely connected to that property as Shimon is. Okay. Umashma midvarav shimushutav ito besada acheres ein lo zchut kedima al anashim acherim shehem bar metzra besada hazu. The implication being is that the only time that a partner is closer than the neighbor is when he's a partner on that property itself. But if, let's say, Shimon was a partner with Reuven on a completely different endeavor, like they own a business together, or they own a property somewhere in Arizona together, that wouldn't entitle Shimon to have precedence over a neighbor on this property. Aval ladas Rabbeinu Tam, afilu im hu shutaf ito bekarkos acheros below bekarka hazu, ein habar metzra yochol lesalegosa. But according to Rabbeinu Tam, even if Shimon is not a partner on this property, but is a partner with Reuven on some other endeavor, the neighbor cannot say that he has first rights of refusal over Shimon. Kevin shesof sof ushutov ito bekarkos, since they are partners after all on some real estate endeavor. Avoldas Rav Hai shafilu imhulo shutov ito bekarkos elo shutov shelo bischara machalo dira en habar metzri yacholasalko. Rav Hai goes even further. It's brought in the rush. You don't even have to be partners in real estate with Shimon. Even if you're partners with Shimon in some business endeavor, you have some kind of partnership that has a financial stake, then Reuven has a right to sell it to the land to Shimon before he sells it to his neighbor. Because of Betrumas Hadeshen, she'en lismoch bazel Rav Hai, keven shirashi v'Rabbeinu Tam v'Rabbeinu Chananu lo pasku kain. The Trumas Hadeshen says you can't rely on this Rav Hai Gaon, who says that any kind of financial partnership suffices. Aval HaRambam pasak kedas Rav Hai, but the Rambam disagrees. The Rambam feels that you can go like Rav Hai Gaon. V'chein pasak moran b'shulchan aruch da'amochel le'echad min hashutfim shelo b'masu matan afal pishu hu lo shutfo b'karka zachaba. And that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins, that if Reuven sells the property to one of his business partners who has no vested stake or interest in this particular property, but since he's a partner of Reuven's in some other endeavor, he gets to keep the property. And no one else can knock him off of that property. And therefore, as far as the halacha is concerned, if a person is your business partner, even let's say it's on one of your multiple businesses, and you decide that you're going to sell him your apartment, he does have precedence over even a neighbor, v'imkana, and therefore, if he already bought it, afilu ben hametzar ein yachol lesalko, then even the neighbor does not have any rights to remove him. Aval imbo lefanav shneim, Ashuta v'habar metzra liknos, but that's just after the fact, post facto. What if these two people come to him and they both are interested in purchasing his apartment? So Kosav ba'arach hashulchan sheyimkar lamatzran. The Aruch HaShulchan writes that there's still the asisa hayashar v'hatov, do the right thing and sell it to the neighbor before selling it to your partner. Kevin shahamatzran l'kuli alma yesh lo zchut kedima ma she'en kein ashutov sheshanoi b'machlokas haposkim. And the argument is that it's a machlokas whether your business partner has any rights at all over a regular person. According to some, he does, but according to others, he doesn't. According to Rashi, he doesn't have any implicit rights because he's not a partner on this property. According to Tosfos, he does, but everyone agrees that the neighbor, there's no dispute that he certainly has rights on this property before other people, and therefore you really should sell it to him lechatchila. Okay. Let me just see if there's anything here to see in the footnote. Okay. Well, let's conclude the tshuva. Because of Moran b'Shulchan Aruch, she'im hamocher sha'al et shcheinav kodem shemachar es dirazo im he me'unyanim liknot et hadira. The Shulchan Aruch writes another halacha that if the person who's interested in selling his apartment first lets his neighbors know that he's going to be selling his apartment and says, would anyone like to buy it? Ve'hem amru shehem lo me'unyanim liknot, and they basically decline the offer, lo shayach yoter dina de bar metzra afal pi shelo haya kan shum kinyan. Then the neighbor cannot come after the fact once he's verbally turned down the offer, even though there was no kinyan, even though there was no formal abrogation of his rights of a bar metzra, just a verbal expression of a declining to purchase it is enough. And he therefore has forfeited all of his rights as a bar metzra. And therefore, my advice is that whenever anyone's interested in selling their condo, the right thing to do, the best thing to do to avoid any problems in the future is present to your neighbors, let's say two guys on the one side and on the other side, upstairs, downstairs, right? Because theoretically, like we learned yesterday, a neighbor who lives one floor beneath you could say, I want to knock out the floor between us and put a staircase in, assuming that that's legal, and he would be a bar metzra. So the best thing to do is notify, let's say, those four neighbors, okay? Up, down, right, left. Let them know you're planning on selling your apartment. If any of you are interested, you have first rights of refusal. If I don't hear from you by, let's say, February 28th, I'm going to be putting it up for sale. Okay? That's a good question. I don't know that you can say that any one of them has priority. You can create a bidding war. If you're smart, let them know I'm about to sell it to one of your neighbors because you're not bidding more than he is. If you want to up your bid, let's say they're all equal. You can let them all know. You've all submitted equal bids. I don't know who I'm going to sell it to because all of your bids are equal. If anyone would like to really get this apartment, consider upping your bid and I'll consider selling it to you. Yeah, so that was Hal just asked that while you were out. So I don't know that a family member will take priority unless you're giving it to him as a gift. If you're gifting it to a family member, then that would certainly, the law of bar mitzvah no longer applies. because there's no longer an argument of the asisa hayashar bahatov, to do the right thing when you're giving. Yeah, yeah. So if a partner has precedence, then it stands to reason that a family member should have. But I'm not so sure. Like, it depends. What if he's my brother and I'm not giving it to him as a gift? I'm just, he wants to buy it. But I don't know that there's necessarily any priority for a family member unless you could say that I'm giving it to him as a gift. At the end of the day, you could structure the sale in a way such that it's a gift, and then have the person that you want to sell it to give you the money some other way. I don't know. That could be a way of circumventing this halacha. But remember, it's based on the asisa hayashar v'hatov, do that which is upright. And like I mentioned yesterday, I could think of a number of instances where the asisa hayashar v'hatov could go the other way. Let's say I have a neighbor who's interested in buying the apartment. The argument goes, why should I sell it to a third party? He can always buy an apartment somewhere else. Well, what if it's in the conservatory? And this guy's been chalishing to get into the conservatory for years because he likes senior citizen summer camp life, right? Right? That's not me. I'm not that guy. But let's say there's someone who really can't wait. Well, if he's offering me more than market value, would have an obligation, this ve'asisa yasher v'hatov, present it to my neighbor and say, match the sale price. If you can match the sale price, you have priority, right? Well, the point I'm making is that it's not always true, this argument, go down the road and buy another apartment. You can always buy another apartment. Um, it could be that it does apply in the conservatory because apartments open up all the time in the conservatory. So maybe I could say to the guy, wait another few weeks and someone else will pass away and you'll be able to buy it from that person. Yeah. Listen, we all know how this works, right? It's not pleasant to think about it, but anytime I hear someone, oh, I just moved into the conservatory, Mazel tov. I'm thinking to myself, who died, right? Which congregant? What? Yeah, no, I'm saying to myself, which congregant of mine passed away so that you got the zuchus to go into their apartment? Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. So it's definitely conceivable that the law of bar mitzvah would apply in the conservatory like other apartment buildings, but there could be certain instances where if an apartment is at a premium, apartment building is at a premium, very, very difficult to find a place there. Maybe a certain property in Manhattan, you know, where maybe not, that's not the case anymore today, where Manhattan is not as desirable as it used to be. But I could definitely conceive of a situation where, let's say in the 80s or 90s, where the law of bar mitzvah may not apply necessarily. Okay. So this he brings in the footnote that the Sma adds that the seller has to disclose to the neighbor um, what the purchase price is. Okay. But if he just says, I'm selling my apartment without saying what the sale price is, the neighbor's declining is not enough. The dikte came miloshin marin b'shulchan aruch sham v'ayin an od b'pamone zav, etc. So the neighbor either has to inquire about the purchase price, or the seller has to say, if you're interested, I can discuss the terms of the purchase with you. And if the guy says flat out, I'm not interested, then he loses his rights.
What about if you post, like here in Florida, they posted at the mailbox all the apartments that are for sale.
Yeah. So lichatchila, the proper thing to do is before that's posted for sale on the bulletin board or wherever, the seller should go to his neighbors. Just knock on their door or put a letter under their door and let them know. Okay, our next shuva, which will start Mirza Shem tomorrow, goes off to another topic. So we're leaving the topic of bar mitzvah for now. Okay, we'll hold it here for today.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care, guys.